Hey guys, welcome back to Tom Spark Reviews, the only independently owned. Can I get some fucking help in here already? VPN review channel here on YouTube. Unlike other channels that are pretty much owned or have investors from VPNs themselves, this channel is not owned by any VPN. We do our own reviews here from community driven and my objective analysis from pure data. So if that sounds good to you, if you want to support an actual reviewer who will not only tell you what's good about a VPN, but also what's bad, why won't it open? Speeds, like I said, are okay. The value is pretty good. Outside of that, it's not really anything special. Stream compatibility across the board isn't best either. A couple of years ago, or maybe even just 2 years ago, ExpressVPN did lay off 180 employees, and a lot of these were engineers. So yeah, not just the good stuff and not being owned by those VPNs. Well, I think you've come to the right place. Also, if you want to help support independent media just like mine, use my links in the description down below. Or you could go on those other channels and use their links if you want to just... No, actually, if you do that, you, man. So guys, today we're going to be talking about my top 5 biggest disappointments when it comes to VPN providers, just as a whole. Some of these services still work, some are no longer active, but overall, each one of these services was a huge disappointment for me in terms of reviewing them on my channel and just kind of what they became. First up on the channel that might not surprise many of you is TorGuard VPN. TorGuard VPN was the king of the channel for a long time. Honestly, from around 2015 to probably 2022, 2023, for a long time, around 8 years or so, this VPN reigned supreme. It was the most affordable option. They had lots of updates. It was fast. It was simple, but worked well. It was extremely affordable, and there was good flexibility in plans. When stream compatibility started becoming an issue, they were one of the first VPNs to offer a solution with dedicated IPs. Really, only TorGuard and ExpressVPN at the time were kind of letting users unblock streaming services. So this was also a little bit before Surfshark and NordVPN became the behemoths they are today. Back then, they really worked the best VPN provider. And if you look at the Google search trend results, you could kind of see a reflection of that. As you can see here, you can kind of see a peak of traffic around 2016, 2015, kind of when I started to notice them and take notice of, how good of a VPN they were. They started losing a little bit of attraction. But honestly, in 2020 or around a COVID era, they were still doing pretty well, in my opinion. And that's kind of when I noticed the peak amount of users from my channel using them. Definitely a very solid VPN. It's still operating nowadays. I reviewed them. I'm not a huge fan of them as much as I used to be, admittedly. I've had some issues with the team. Their ranking started to slip a little bit, and then I got removed and kind of ghosted from their affiliate program, which has also happened to many other people. One of my biggest problems, though, probably with TorGuard is just it seems like it's no longer updated, or at least it hasn't had an update for a long time. Some of the applications are 2 or 3 years out of date. The main PC application hasn't been updated for more than a year. And if you go to their forums, a lot of features that were promised are just not happening. For example, you can see this guy saying, when split tunnel income, it was promised, and most people seem to say this guy is giving up, or they kind of give up. This guy says, genuinely concerned, there's not been a single release or update since 4.8.29, almost a year ago. As a TorGuard user, the product appears to be defunct at this point and absent meaningful releases and feedback from the company. I will be dropping it until my next invoice. Says products like this must have regular updates and patches. I agree with him. You can also find multiple other people complaining about lack of updates, and literally all these people are not getting any responses, which is kind of embarrassing for the company since this is their official forums. This guy on April 2nd posted, any new word? Been almost a year since there's been any updates, and there's been no responses. So I'm not really sure what's going on with the company. Like I said, I lost contact with them around last summer, which is like a little more than half a year ago. It seems like, at the last time I was talking to the company, they seem to be focusing more on their router kind of software, their WireGuard apps and stuff like that. There has been some updates, like I think in October, or at least some responses to this. However, I know that the guy working on this, he was actually in my community as well. His name was Jason. He did get fired and let go from that project. and I don't know what's going on with their kind of router side of things since then. But overall, that's kind of a summation of my disappointment with TorGuard. I think it was one of the best VPNs, but a combination of lack of updates, weird management decisions with affiliates, not paying affiliates and kind of ghosting them, stuff like that, definitely has soured the brand for my community. And I don't think anyone here is really using it anymore from my community. Although it's kind of hard to tell because I literally got kicked out of the affiliate program. My account was deleted. I couldn't even see what customers were doing anymore, which I've never had happen before. Anyways, guys, next up is VPN, and this one is in a bigger disappointment in some ways because they just simply stopped kind of destroy the company, I guess you could say. I honestly think VPN was another case of mismanagement. VPN spent too much on marketing in the beginning days. They bought out someone like Jerry Rigs Everything, who's one of the biggest YouTubers, to do an advertisement. I heard rumors that they spent like 10 to 20 grand on like a 30-second advertisement there. Admittedly, that is how I heard about the VPN and how it did kind of gain some traction early on. I think VPN had some really good developers, some kind of fishy things. In fact, like their application was really, really close and almost identical to private internet application, private internet access's VPN, and it had some similar employees. And I think there might have been some legal battles around that, but I was never really sure. VPN was just one of those VPNs that came out of nowhere, punched way harder above its weight class than it deserved. It was affordable. It was listening to me and my community, really implementing things really well. So much so they even put a little blurb here from me on their website. So that was kind of funny. I even was working with them, kind of telling me, hey, my community wants you guys to implement this. Sometimes they would. I had a really good kind of a feedback loop with them, and it was really kind of speed running them to the top of the rankings. I think at the highest, it was around number 2 rated, but then things came crashing down. There was kind of pretty much like the management, the CEO, and various other people just stopped responding to people on Discord, stopped responding to me. Affiliate payments stopped coming out. Some people were claiming they weren't being paid, like developers, and eventually the kind of main Discord mod, Alex, started just banning people who were criticizing it. A couple months later, they ended up just kind of letting people have a free kind of trial to Winscribe just to save, I guess, any kind of last respect they had. The funny thing is, you could still find this website right here. I'm not exactly sure why. I got an email about this. But yeah, it shut down 2 years ago. But yeah, for some reason, this website's back up. I'm not really sure why. But it is kind of like a little interesting slice of that history. Just probably the VPN that started the quickest and burned out the fastest, just probably due to mismanagement and mismanaging funds. Another VPN I'm kind of disappointed in, not necessarily more or less than the other ones, but Cactus VPN. Cactus VPN, I think, was one of the smaller VPNs that I think VPN punched above its weight. It was extremely affordable, pretty fast, and stuff like that. However, I've noticed I just kind of over time stopped being updated as much. It didn't really have as good as I think it kind of WireGuard, or some of the servers weren't as fast for me as some of the other VPNs. They ranked 3 or 4 at a time, I think, back then. I really liked Cactus VPN. I had a pretty good feedback loop with this company, giving them some feedback and suggestions from my community, which they took advantage of and kind of implemented into the product offering, at least some small things. Definitely a cool company, and I like the people behind it. It was based in Romania, or one of these countries, I think, which is kind of unique. And overall, I think they did a pretty good job with this one. It just kind of stopped being updated as much, kind of stopped hearing back from the team. And overall, it just seemed kind of like one of those VPNs that kind of lost the battle to some of these bigger behemoths like Nord and Surfshark, which is very common across the industry. Another one I was kind of disappointed with Atlas VPN. Now, Atlas VPN was one of those products that kind of came out of nowhere, started advertising a ton, and I always kind of suspected it was kind of owned or kind of similarly operated from Surfshark and NordVPN, but maybe more so to be a free offering. They eventually did kind of migrate into those, or kind of absolve the company with Nord. So my suspicions about that were kind of right. It kind of was interesting. It kind of had an interesting pricing model. Like I said, they had a pretty generous free model, probably one of the better free VPNs out there, but eventually just kind of died down and kind of sunset their service. So overall, that's kind of my final thoughts on that one. Another one is AirVPN. Now, AirVPN, out of all these, is probably the one that is operating the best right now and most active. It's kind of had a resurgence because people on Reddit stopped using Molvad for port forwarding and Proton doesn't work quite as well for port forwarding, and AirVPN is one of the limited VPNs that does support port forwarding. So if you're a torrent maximalist, this could be an option. However, in my opinion, port forwarding is primarily used for seating ratios and stuff like that. But even then, you can still get very good speeds with other VPNs that don't specifically port forward or offer that as a feature. I've always gotten better speeds with NordVPN over AirVPN, even with port forwarding. The thing about AirVPN that is nice is they have a very transparently designed website. The pricing model is clear. You can even buy 3 days. They have a decent amount of payment selections, and overall the service isn't bad. They even have an open source application. So in a lot of ways, I think I'm maybe least disappointed from this one out of all the other VPNs. It's kind of stick to what it's done well over the years, kind of impressively so. However, that said, this one does not have an iOS application. Don't expect an Apple TV application. Honestly, to me, that's kind of embarrassing because a VPN should, by bare bones, have the core application features. They just don't offer it and don't really seem interested to. They also only have 5 simultaneous connections per account. This just seems kind of like one of those services that sticks to what it does well and kind of sticks to it strictly so, almost disappointingly so, if you're someone who's hoping for more updates, more features, and more applications to just be competitive to other VPNs in the industry. They also haven't really done anything that interesting in terms of new features and new offerings or new services or anything like that. So that's just kind of why it's not as interesting for me to discuss or review as often on the channel, because it really hasn't changed at all for the last 10 years I've reviewed it. Maybe just implementing WireGuard more slowly than some of the other options out there. Anyways, guys, those are my personal 5 biggest disappointments when it comes to VPN. Let me know what yours are in the description down below, and I'll see you guys again very soon.